Hello and welcome back to the Get Organized HQ channel. I'm Tasha and today we are talking about how to organize your spice jars. All right, you know the drill. If you haven't already, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell to turn on notifications, and give this video a big thumbs up. I think that spice jars are the perfect place to start whenever you want to get organized. That's because it is a quick and easy project that you are going to see the results of day after day after day. Every time you get in your kitchen and cook and use your spices, you will see your beautifully organized spice jars, and that alone is motivation to keep going with organizing the rest of your house. Now, I am going to show you some spice racks that you can use, some spice jars that you can use, and some places to look for spice labels. The reason I go with the spice racks first is because I think it's important to decide first where you're going to store your spices. I think a lot of times people start searching online, get all excited about all the spice jar options, but don't actually take the time to think about where they're going to put them and whether or not those jars are going to fit with their space. So first decide where you're going to put your spices, then decide what kind of jars you're going to put in them. So I'm gonna dive right in to some of the options for how to store your spices no matter what jars you're using.
When it comes to spice racks, let's start with this classic 3-tier spice rack. So it's got the 3 tiers. Normally they're expandable, so you can make it any width you want, which is a really nice feature, but do note that's gonna mean there's a little bit of a step there. So if you put 2 spice jars right next to each other, right where that divide is, they are not gonna be the same height. So that might bother some people, but it just kind of depends on your style. But it is nice because it can expand to fit in most any space. I would definitely recommend keeping this kind of spice rack on an open countertop. I know it's common to see pictures of them in a cabinet, but here's what I think is really difficult. You have to be able to lift up and out to get a spice off of this rack. And if you have this in a cabinet, it could be pretty hard to have that overhead clearance to be able to lift the jar all the way up and out without having to take all the front jars off first. Also, it's worth noting that with this kind of rack, you're gonna need to either label the tops or something like that because you're not gonna be able to see the front of the jar to see what is in the spice jar. So a traditional spice jar label isn't probably gonna work. If you wanna be able to see everything while it's sitting there, you're gonna have to be able to label the very top. So while I don't necessarily recommend the tiered spice rack for cabinets, I do recommend a Lazy Susan because these are going to let you see all of your spices very easily and you don't have to have that overhead clearance to get them out. So you just set them all on there and you turn the turntable and you can get to any of your spices, which is really nice. This one has a nice grip pad. So while some of them, fall over, gravity's a thing, they don't really slip around while on there. So you don't have to worry about when spinning the turntable, they're not gonna go flying around or just like shifting everywhere. That sticky pad, it's not really sticky, that grippy pad is really gonna hold them down nicely. Another popular option for storing spices is on some sort of wall-mounted rack like this one. So you just load your spice jars in like so, and then you can actually get as many of these as you want and configure them however you would like on the wall. So if you wanna have multiple of these stacked on top of each other, or you could even put some of them side by side, just depending on the wall space you had. This particular set, I'll have linked below, has 4 whole racks in it, which is really nice. Now do note, these particular spice jars stick off the edge, but they are held in with that metal bar there, and so this is a pretty versatile way to store your spices. Most of them come with some sort of hanging device. These have a little hole in the back. You can put a screw or a nail there to hold in your spices, and this is great if you have a lot of free wall space. This next one is an interesting hybrid between a spice jar and a spice organizer because it really is all in one. It is another turntable variety, and there are just so many unique things about this. So each of these little pods locks into the carousel. You can lock and unlock it at the top, and it's just a white plastic. You flip open the top to load it in. You have a couple different things up top. So first of all, you have the place where I decided to load the spice in. Now, I will tell you, it was really hard to get the spices in. It was really messy, in my opinion. And then there's also a spot on the back for pouring spices out. We'll give that a little test here in a minute, but it's got those couple of options there, and then it just sits nicely back into the carousel. The most unique thing by far about these spice jars is this little dial right here. This allows you to dispense measured spices. So you flip open that plastic piece right there, and then you just turn the dial, and it is going to pour out a pre-measured 1/4 teaspoon. There's a little collector at the bottom. It measures a 1/4 teaspoon, and every time you turn the dial, you get a 1/4 teaspoon out. So that's pretty nifty. You don't even have to get out your measuring tools whenever you use these. You just close that back up, set it in the carousel whenever you're done. As you can see, the entire exterior is a white plastic. Not my very favorite, but that's a stylistic choice. This is where I showed you before that I loaded in the spices. You could get a whole teaspoon in here if you wanted to. Measure out just using your regular measuring spoons instead of using the little dispenser that it has. Like I said, it is kind of messy when you're loading spices. I found the spice tended to get all over the outside of it. Then as you flip over to the back side here, there is a piece here for pouring. Oops, that is not supposed to go off. So that little plastic piece opens up, but it's not actually supposed to come all the way off. I don't think it's broken. It's just like popped off. Let me see if I can get it back on here. Okay, and there it goes. All right, so carefully open that back piece there. It's actually a little hard to get open, but if you can pop that open, then you can also sprinkle the spice out of those slots right there. It pours pretty easily as long as it's a fine material. I think something thicker would get stuck. Stuff gets on the side of this really badly. That's probably one of my other least favorite things about it, but it is a pretty nifty little gadget. And then before we totally dive into spice jars, here's one more that's kind of a hybrid spice organizer spice jar. It's a magnetic spice jar. This has a viewfinder on the front. You can see the spices in there, and the entire top does come off. So that's good for loading. Just be careful because the whole thing can come off somewhat easily, but I don't think it would just come off just sitting with no one touching it. There are a couple flip tops, so you've got some holes to do a little bit of sprinkling, and there's also a little pour spout that you can open up there. These can be configured all different ways. So I think they're designed to be put on a refrigerator. So if you've got a lot of refrigerator open space and you don't have a lot of other space for spices, these would be a good option for something like that, just little metal tins. This first set of spice jars is just a set of plastic spice jars off of Amazon. At the time of recording this, it's $14 for a set of 14 spice jars. So just $1 per spice jar, which is really pretty good. And I was really impressed with the quality of these spice jars. It is a thick plastic, and when you squeeze the sides of it, it does not have very much give. So a very high quality plastic. It's got a flip top lid with 2 sides on it. So the one side is a shaker side with holes to kind of shake out the spice, and the other side is a space to put in a teaspoon. So let's go ahead and test that really quick. I'm gonna grab a teaspoon and see how it fits into that hole, and if I can fit a whole teaspoon in there and level it out, and it works pretty well. There's not a lot of extra room, but you really can get a whole teaspoon down in there, measure out your spice, so that's definitely a win for these spice jars. And then when it comes to shaking out the spice, the holes are pretty big, so I don't think there's gonna be too much issue with spices clogging up in those holes if you're trying to shake out the spice. So all in all, it's a really nice spice jar. It is a pretty wide spice jar. That's something to note. It's honestly about the width of my entire thumb, or I guess the length of my whole thumb. So that's definitely a little bit fatter at the base than your average spice jar, but I really do like them and they fit pretty nicely on the rack. These are the Progressive Pro Keeper spice jars. These are a little bit more upscale, I would say. They're about $3.50 per spice jar. So a little more expensive, but a very high quality spice jar. They have a flip top lid with lots of holes for shaking out one side and then a slot in the other side for putting in a teaspoon. Now, I did think this slot was a little bit small, but let's do the teaspoon test and see how it goes. So I've got my teaspoon and we're gonna see if I can get it in there and scoop out a full leveled out teaspoon, and to my surprise, it actually worked pretty well. I was able to get the whole teaspoon in there and level it out, so that seems to work. And then lots and lots of holes for shaking out spices. They're a little bit smaller holes, so if you had something like red pepper flakes or something thicker or a bigger spice, it might be harder to get out. I like the way the lid seals and closes. There's a silicone band and it snaps closed. This is a really high quality plastic, more like acrylic. Doesn't have really any give to it. It is rectangular and it actually gets fatter at the top than it is at the bottom. So that's just a stylistic choice. Nothing really about the function of it, but a little wider at the top, a little differently shaped, but a good spice jar. These are the classic spice jars that come up when you search Amazon for spice jars. They are a glass bottle, they've got a metal lid, and they've got the square rectangular shape, but there is something I want to note about these, and that is that they are a little bit on the small size when it comes to decanting spices. So compare to this spice jar we looked at earlier. there is a lot left in that spice jar from when I tried to pour the contents of that into this jar. So just realize that you may not be able to fully decant your spices into this jar, and that may be a disadvantage to these. Now, when it comes to the design of these spice jars, they have a screw-on lid. There's shaking holes on one side and a little pop-up little valve thing on the other side so you could pour the spice out. Obviously, no teaspoon's gonna fit into there, so if you wanna get a teaspoon into this, I think your only way is gonna be to pop off that entire top lid. And then let's see how a teaspoon fits into there. So let me grab one and try and stick it in. And it actually still, without that plastic piece, does not fit into the spice jar at all. So the only way to measure out this spice is going to be to pour it. So that is another thing that may be a disadvantage to these spice jars if you're wanting to measure directly out of the jar. It's also got some kind of small holes for shaking, but you can, as you can see, the spice is still coming out. So once again, depends on what you're trying to get out of the jar, depends on what you're using it for, but a little bit smaller holes, a little less functionality than some of the others. Aesthetically, these are probably my favorite spice jars in the video. They are a glass jar with a bamboo wooden lid. They've got the little silicone ring when you pop the lid on. I love how these spice jars look. I also love how big these spice jars are. There is plenty of extra room. When I decanted the spices, I could have bought an even larger amount of the spice and still got all of it into the jar, so that's definitely a feature. However, with that size comes some disadvantage in how they're gonna fit. Even on this rack, it hangs off just the tip of my finger, but I do have them stair-stepped. So you see how there's 2 rows, but there's only 4 in the back row. That's because if I put them right back to back, it would be pretty much the full tip of my finger hanging off the ledge. So they wouldn't really fit that way. If you want to stair-step them on a rack like this, they're gonna kind of have to go doors and windows like they said in choir class. Now, as you can see, there's not really any sprinkling or pour spouts. You just take the whole lid off. I'm gonna grab a teaspoon real quick and let's take a look. Obviously the teaspoon is gonna fit in there. I will note that if you really want to be able to rub it off along the side to kind of get the top really even, the curved side makes it pretty hard to get a perfectly even top there, but easily a teaspoon would fit into those jars. These are also a little bit of a pricier option, but I really do think they're very eye-catching. Before I dive into showing you where to find good spice jar labels, I want to show you this set of spices I got from Smith and Truslow. It's called the Fabulous Flavorites box, and this is just a little set of 6 spices. So if you're looking for somewhere new to try to get some organic and also custom blend spices, you could try these out. There's all sorts of things in this box: thyme, chili powder, cinnamon, ginger, oregano, paprika. Like I said, they have some of their own custom blends. So this here is their chili powder blend. You can only get it from Smith and Truslow, so it can be fun to try out little blends that you can't pick up in the store. They also sell just some organic spices. So this is their organic oregano, just pure oregano in the jar. So it can be fun to try out some more fancy, high quality spices. I will definitely put a link down below so you can look into them and check out their site and all the different spices that Smith and Truslow has to offer. There's actually one other box I want to grab real quick here and show you. I also got some spices from a company called The Spice House, and there are some really cool things about these spices. Let me grab the box here real quick. All right, so this is the Kitchen Starter Collection from The Spice House. This is also a set of 8 spices. You'll notice these jars are a bit bigger, and the thing that I absolutely love about these spices is actually the jars that they come in. So one thing you could do when organizing your spices is get spices that come in cute jars already and just save the jar. I mean, isn't that just such a darling little label on that jar? So just save the jar, wash it, and refill it with whatever spices you want to purchase, or keep purchasing them from the Spice House. So this company also has some custom blends, like this is the Back of the Yards blend. It's a garlic pepper rub that you can use along with just some standard organic spices. So this is the Spice House. This is the spices that they would say should be in every single kitchen. So I'll link to them down below as well. You can check out either the Spice House or Smith & Truslow to find some unique spices. Okay, so where do you go to find spice jar labels? Well, whenever I'm looking for something, I almost always start by looking on Amazon, and there are just tons and tons of options. And the first thing that I will tell you is pay attention to the spice jars that you buy. Sometimes they come with labels themselves, and if you're happy with those labels, then you don't even have to make an additional purchase. But one thing I like about a lot of these listings on Amazon, as you can see, it really shows you a spice jar that these labels work well with. So these labels right here remind me an awful lot of those spice jars that had the bamboo lid. Obviously, these look a lot like those little glass, more square rectangular spice jars. You do want to be careful and pay attention to the dimensions because pictures can be deceiving, but there are all sorts of different varieties. Oh, I love these black ones with the white letters right here. So all sorts of options on Amazon. But if you want something a little bit more custom, I would recommend going to Etsy because there are all sorts of sellers on Etsy who make spice jars. And a lot of times you can actually find a listing where you can tell them exactly the spices that you want. So if you have some really custom spices or something like that, these are super fun right here, just the words. Although that is another thing to look for whenever you are getting spice jar labels. So these look so fun on the label, but you can even see on the jar how it's really hard to actually read the label. So you might want to get something with a backing like one of these so that you can make sure that no matter what is in the jar, you can always read the label. And then one other thing when looking for labels, you always have the option to actually just make some labels yourself. And this is actually a shameless plug for the labeling handbook that we have in the Get Organized HQ online store. So if you are a Cricut user, I believe that this labeling handbook is actually, yes, with the Cricut Joy. So you could, of course, make labels with any Cricut, but the Cricut Joy specifically, this is going to walk you through how to make your own labels. So if you want a little DIY project, maybe check out this labeling handbook here. I'll put a link to it in the description down below, and you can have a fun DIY label making party.
Well, that's it for the ultimate guide to organizing your spices, and I would love to know, did you find a new product that you want to try out in your own spice jar organization project? Let me know down in the comments, and we will see you next time.